Welcome to Speaking of Faith with Bishop DeDe Duncan Proby of the Episcopal Diocese of Central New York. Thanks for joining us.
Hey friends, welcome to the podcast. Here we are to speak about our faith, which in this day and time, I think is a courageous thing to do. My name is DeDe Duncan Proby. I am the Episcopal Bishop of Central New York. I'm joined by Adam Eichelberger, who is our Director of Communications. And we are here today to speak of our faith, something that either people are doing a whole lot of or not at all. And I want to be clear, in this day and time, we need to be very clear when we talk about our faith, what we're speaking about. Christian nationalism is a sin. And so when we think we're speaking of our faith by talking about Christian nationalism, that we need to recognize that that's a call to change our mind, to repent, and to lay that sin down. Jesus didn't come to us so we could have a country. Jesus comes to us so we can be saved and be restored and be unified with God and God's purposes. So it's in this podcast, our conversation is around speaking of our faith in life-giving, vibrant, empowering ways, and to speak about our faith to also with humility and curiosity. This is not a podcast to tell you what to think. This is not a podcast to say we know it all. This is a podcast to open up and invite all of us with curiosity and humility to a deeper understanding of God and God's purposes for our lives. And so with that preface, let me invite you into this conversation. I hope that it is empowering for you and curious for you, and maybe makes you want to, learn more or have conversations. We have been talking about our baptismal covenant in the Episcopal Church. This is a baptismal covenant that is known in other denominations. Your faith, whatever it may be, maybe this is something that's completely new to you, but I welcome you to the conversation wherever you are in terms of your desire to speak about faith and your curiosity. So we've talked about the covenant is a bedrock in the Episcopal Church. We talk about who we say God is in the first three biddings. We talk about continuing the apostles' teaching and fellowship. We talk about growing in our faith. We talk about the commitment to be living our faith, an example of what we say and what we do, that how we live is always part of what we believe. And so the interplay between that. And then today, and with each of these biddings, I should say, is we will with God's help. We respond that it takes God's grace to do these things, to repent of our sinfulness and to do these things. But today we get to a bidding that often is very popular for people because they kind of like it. But I want to caution when we start to talk about it, the challenge of this bidding. And so here it is. Will you seek and serve Christ in all persons, loving your neighbor as yourself? And we respond, I will with God's help. Now, a few months ago, someone said to me, I tried loving my neighbor as myself and it just didn't work. And I said, it really didn't. Because we love our neighbor not to coerce them into being different or to love them until they change and are kind of what we like, or we love them until they get that they are just, really annoying. We love our neighbor because that's how we are transformed. And we love our neighbor because we recognize in our neighbor that other people are beloved persons of God too. And so we're not the only ones. And that our faith isn't about being right. It isn't about exerting power over someone. It isn't about telling someone that they're wrong. It's about an innate understanding that we need to change. We need to seek a different way. And I think all of us can look at this world and see that our high-mindedness and our desire to be right at all times and to be know-it-alls, that it isn't working for us. It's just dividing us. And so when we speak of our faith, and especially in this bidding, that when we're going to love our neighbor as ourselves, that it begins with seek And I mean, look at the wording here. Will you seek and serve? Will you seek and serve Christ in all persons? That what we're looking for and what we're seeking and what we're desiring to do is to be compassionate about God's created blessedness in all people. And I don't know about you, listener, but sometimes this is a tough one because we see in other people, well, what we see first is what we don't like about them, their brokenness, how they might scare us. What we see in them is foreigners to us, maybe. And instead, we're making a covenant with God that we will seek and serve Christ in all persons, that we will love others as if not only the way we want to be loved, but as if it's Jesus, as if it's Christ himself. And that can be a hard thing in this world because so much of what's happening around us is dehumanizing and divisive. And I want to be right at all costs. And you don't know who I am. And don't you know who I am? And all of that. And this bidding, we're covenanting with God that we're going to be different than that. And that we're going to recognize in another person God's beloved creation. And this means this is a hard thing for us because it means that whoever that is that you're opposing, whoever it is that is challenging to you, whoever may even be oppressing and harming you, that when we seek and serve Christ in all persons, it changes how we look at one another. And I want to be clear in saying that seeking and serving Christ also means that we set boundaries. It doesn't mean anything goes. Loving your neighbor as yourself doesn't mean, okay, well, I'm just going to be a doormat and they can do whatever they want. No, that isn't loving. People need boundaries. And those of us who have children or those of us who have pets or children, furry children, know that boundaries are really part of a whole and healthy being. That we need to know when we need to stop or say, I'm sorry, or set a boundary about things. So it isn't loving to say anything goes. We wouldn't let, our children do things that are harming and say, well, I can't really set a boundary because, to seek and serve Christ in all persons means I seek what's best for all of us. That as people and people of God, loving our neighbor, seeking what's best for another person means it's not about me being right. It's about me being compassionate the way Jesus is. It's not about me asserting power. It's about me sharing power. It's not about me holding all. It's about me offering all. And so this is a complex bidding. And I think we do it a disservice to think that it's easy or that we're just going to be nice. Because seeking and serving Christ might be saying to someone in power, no. That is not the way of Christ, harming other people. Or, no, I deserve to be respected too. And so I'm going to love you enough and not to tell you the truth. So these are challenging things. And I think this bidding is a lot more difficult than we often give it credit for. And I think that it's something that we do need God's help to fulfill. So, Adam, as I'm talking about this, what is sort of percolating for you and what thoughts or questions come to your mind?
Well, I think for me specifically, when I focus in on or I think about or I pray over this bidding in the Baptismal Covenant, it seems really easy on the surface, especially for those of us who are kind of like in the church world, because like this feels like a no-brainer, right? We're going to seek and serve Christ in others, right? Mm-hmm. And we're going to serve them. So like it's really easy for us to key in on those who are in need, those who are struggling, those who are, as we talk about on this podcast before, on the margins, who absolutely need the love and care of Christ and the church. But you're right. All of this is really hard. I mean, it's demonstrated, and we have to say every time we affirm these biddings, we will with God's help. So we're acknowledging we can't do it on our own. Mm-hmm. But one of the first things I wanted to ask you about, Bishop DeDe, is the really big thing that stood out to me in this bidding is in all persons, loving your neighbor as yourself. Because I feel like whether we're breaking it down into the the teachings of Jesus, or more colloquially, we think about like the golden rule: treat others the way that you would want to be treated.
Mm-hmm.
I think that maybe that's a hard part. I'm going to speak from my own experience. It is a hard part for me. Much of my upbringing in the church kind of revolves around, I got to put everybody before me. And so how do we, as people who are kind of exploring or navigating our faith, love ourselves well so that we can love others well?
Oh my gosh, it's so essential. And I'm so glad that you asked and that we're having this part of the conversation, because otherwise this becomes kind of a toxic bidding. If we're always helping and it's all about the other person, then we cease to be a person. Because part of being a whole being is that we take up space, whether verbally, physically, emotionally, whatever, that we are an expression of God. And so what this bidding really, when you seek and serve Christ in others, you're saying that people are a living expression of God. And so if they're not expressing anything, then they're vacant. And it's a challenge for a lot of us who were brought up that we're supposed to help, but never need anything. Well, then it's kind of toxic, isn't it? If I'm just helping, then the victim is the person being helped, and I'm somehow superior because I don't need help. And there's this interesting paradox and reality that we all kind of know, is that person who will not let you help them because they're going to help you first. And the closer we get to that behavior, the more we realize that it's an abuse of power. Because when we've ceased to be fellow human beings and we've become the helper and the helpee, and those two things are not to be crossed. And when I'm around people who refuse help, it's important, one, to recognize it so that we can be aware of this power imbalance. But then to take that to heart and say, when have I been the person who's insisting on being the helper and refusing the mutual relationship of being a helpee? And so one, there's that dynamic in it. But then two, self-help and self-care, we seem to have this kind of issue as humans where it's either self-indulgent or self-care. And a lot of times we fall into the self-indulgent thing where it's just me. It's this narcissistic kind of care where it's just, I want to, all me. And that isn't what this is saying either. We need balance. We need boundaries. When someone tells us no, are we offended and feel kind of insecure about it? Or do we feel like, oh, good, thank you for letting me know. That's a boundary for you. I have a better understanding of my dynamic here. Insecurity and self, we often will punish ourselves, and we can punish ourselves with self-indulgence, which is an interesting reality of humans. So this balance of the helper and the helpee, for it to be mutual and to be something that when we need help, we ask for help. And when we have help to give, that we offer help. And that when that help is received, to say, I respect that you don't want my help right now. The more we are part of this movement of loving as we love ourselves, the more we see the reciprocity of it, the more that we can build trust and integrity. When we are insisting someone receive our help, then we are dehumanizing them. When we insist that we are only helper and you're the helpee, we're dehumanizing things, including our own souls. And it's really, this isn't easy. And there are times when we think, oh, but I'm loving my neighbor as myself. And later in life, or at some point later, we realize, oh no, I was just trying to deal with my own anxiety, and making them the target of me helping helped me feel less like I was vulnerable. And so it is not easy. We do need God's help with this. It is a very, very complex part of being a human being in relationship with one another and God.
That's really important. And we have talked about on this podcast the importance of self-care and realizing that we are also in need. We can't be these vessels that are constantly pouring out and never being willing to be filled ourselves, because then we're not able to give, we're not able to serve, we're not able to live up to that bidding that we're supposed to accept.
I don't know, listener, if you've had times where you needed help and you felt awkward asking because it felt like you shouldn't need help. That humility, anyone who's in 12-step programs or anyone who's in dealing with mental health issues knows that to be able to say I need help is a sign of strength, not weakness. It's a sign of wholeness, not incapacity. To say we need help is to acknowledge that we are human. It is an important, essential part of being a human being.
No, absolutely. The second thing I wanted to ask, before we do have a listener question this week. How can we live up to this bidding when so many of the people around us, so many of our neighbors, and we talked about this before on the podcast, but I was hoping maybe we could go into it a little bit deeper, when they can be so challenging, or when we seem to have such fundamental differences with people. We have talked about this as a staff in the diocese. We've talked about it with our clergy. We talked about it with people in our pews, that our parishes, our people in our pews are so diverse in who they are as individuals, but also in their beliefs and ideologies. And sometimes these things can really kind of clash. So how do we love and serve others when that can be so challenging? Like, is there a time in your own life or in your own ministry where you have had to really lean into this bidding in what you do as a bishop?
Oh my goodness. How long do we have? How long is this podcast? Yes. We all, listener, you right now, if you think about in your life, I think it's really hard sometimes to navigate this bidding, especially because we associate seeking and serving Christ in all persons with being nice. And really, seeking and serving Christ in all persons is at times to be clear, and that clarity is kindness, that truth is kindness, but truth often hurts. It will, truth will disturb you before it feels good. Truth is hard. And so seeking and serving Christ in another person is when that other person says, when you did this, it really hurt me. And the first thing we want to do is justify it. So, oh, but I didn't mean that. And I was this and I was that. Instead of looking at the person and saying, I am so sorry. And I apologize that hurt you. I also want to acknowledge that I was hurt because of X. And so to have a mutual relationship. So yes. And there's times when seeking and serving in Christ in all persons means it may not be helpful for us to be around a particular person or situation, where part of it is, this is so broken. It can't be repaired in this life. And so I'm going to honor that it may be best for us to not be in relationship because my presence is not helpful and this situation isn't helpful. And it's tender work. It really is. It involves us being truth tellers to ourselves, to be able to receive and offer truth, and then also to admit when we're wrong and our failings, and then to repent, to change our minds. I want to connect. To repent means change our minds, or to seek the way of God. So yes, I think all the time in my ministry. There are times when, listener, you may be, people have these ideas about me. They'll think that I've done something or not done something, or we'll get letters sometimes in the diocese where someone says, well, I know the bishop thinks this. And I'll think, no, I don't. I don't think that. But to recognize it's not really about me. It's about all of us being whole people. So
that is absolutely true. Like I love that you said all of that. So here is our question for this week. This question comes from Shane. Shane is a recent high school graduate. Shane got out of high school, went into the military. Shane shared that they grew up Episcopalian, but they're really far from home and haven't really been able to connect with the church. And the reason why I really wanted to ask Shane's question this week is because Shane asked, at the root of Shane's question, what are some ways that I can best serve and love people when I'm far from home and I don't have a church that I go to? So it sounds like Shane hasn't really found a parish to connect with.
Mhm.
They are a little bit more mobile than most because they are in the military. They're moving around and stuff like that. So what are the ways that we, I guess, in the light of this bidding from the Baptismal Covenant, how can we live this out when maybe we don't have a place to put down roots and we feel like we're not really in a community to serve? How do we do that? How can Shane do that? And maybe the rest of us?
Oh, and Shane, I just want to thank you for your service and for your dedication to being a person who serves others. That is a very, I just want to thank you for that right off. And then for your question, of course, and reaching out. It's the first thing that came to mind with your question actually was Jesus saying, that where's my home, like the birds of the air, I have no place to call my own. Jesus traveling and moving, and throughout Jesus's ministry, there's this aspect of it that is also traveling. Now, Jesus had people with whom he traveled that he had close relationships, and so community with that traveling life. And that may be true for you, that there are people now in different areas, different bases, different places you've served where you have communication with them. And so things like Zoom or phone calls, or to keep those people close to you, to maintain those relationships where you can call and know that the person at the end of the line is somebody who knows you in some capacity. And then when you are at a new base, to take advantage of some of the things that the military does offer in terms of getting settled at a new base, to look for the chaplains who are at the bases and to connect with those chaplains as appropriate. And then just like you did here, is to ask the question and to say, hey, I'm looking for people who can share, and be in community with me. It starts with us being willing to reach out and to be creative. Each listener, you probably have many ideas of how you do this in your own life, whether it's joining clubs or whether it's going to meetings or whatever it is that for you is a place you build community. But to know that it is essential to have that community and to have it travel with you. One of the gifts of this time in which we live is this podcast is builds community. Shane, I don't know you, but I feel like I'm hearing you, and I'm in, I hear your journey. For us to be utilizing technology to share our journey, and at times when we can, to find people we can be with in the ways that are available to us. But I want to affirm you asking the question and reaching out gives us all an opportunity to think, how am I building community? And to see it as not extraneous to our lives, but essential. You need community. We are not built to live in isolation. We're built to be part of community. Well, friends, we have talked about a lot of things, and how we seek and serve Christ in all persons, to be attentive to other persons. I invite you to listen to the people around you and hear what they're saying that's similar to your own journey. One of the things I probably should have mentioned was that when we listen and when we seek and serve Christ in other persons, we will find our commonality. We'll find our community, because we'll realize that anxiety and fear, love and joy, these things are common to the human family. And so to seek and serve Christ in all persons is to engage with those shared values and shared things that we may have in common with people around us. So I'm going to pass the baton to you. To the best way to live out this bidding is to go and to live it out. So my prayer for you is that you will seek and serve Christ in all persons, that you will love your neighbor as yourself, that you will share your vulnerabilities and your needs in appropriate ways with the people around you, and foster conversation with others. So may you be blessed and be a blessing. And until next time, let's continue to speak of our faith. Let's learn together. And may you be well as you're doing that.
Thanks again for joining us on Speaking of Faith, a production of the Episcopal Diocese of Central New York. Make sure to leave us a review and subscribe wherever you get podcasts. Connect with us online at cnyepiscopal.org, or you can join us on Facebook, Instagram, or YouTube at CNY Episcopal. We'll see you next time.